Hello and welcome to Upside, where every week we dig behind the headlines to give you the news affecting European venture. Today, Lomax, Mads and myself, and we're digging into the oil shock, how this is going to come back to Europe and hit startups. We got Europe this week smashing it out of the park. Cursor, a 50 bill valuation, really big fat WTF, AI chips and war, and so much more. Now, starting at the top, gents, the oil shock. We have to talk about this. So Trump, I think, has just kicked off a global recession. I just think we don't know it yet. Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz for the past 2 weeks is a massive problem. Oil and gas coming through the Straits, as we know and have spoken about before, roughly 1/5 of the world's supply comes through that strait. For context, I was looking at the numbers. That's about 20 million barrels of crude per day and about 10 billion cubic feet of LNG. And that really puts into context the 400 million barrels that was released by the IEA member countries, which is effectively around a 20-day buffer. So I think it's just not really going to matter all that much. The US, we've seen, has now reduced sanctions on Russia. So obviously they're going to buy some Russian oil. My take is the damage has already been done. Inflation up, interest rates steady or up. Not good news for us. And I think we are in global recession territory. The other thing before we dig in, I wanted to just share is I was looking at the new leader of Iran, who's an incredibly strong military guy, unlike his dad, obviously devout and driven. He is not backing down after seeing his father killed, his wife, his sister, brother-in-law, and their daughter. And he, by his own words, there will be revenge. This is not going to look good. This is bad news. I mean, he's extremely wealthy, powerful, military guy. He's got a personal fortune of around 3 billion. He's got about 100 billion set aside outside of national wealth and control of parliament. And he knows how to use it. So, Mads, a lot of word salad there. Pair it back to Europe, pair it back to us, startups investing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, a bit of a pickle we're in. I mean, we were talking about the anniversary of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine a few weeks ago, and as we'll recall at the time, that meant that we could no longer rely on Russian gas, and so we turned elsewhere to buy kind of that core energy supply for the continent. And some of it we could get from the US, but a huge portion we got from Qatar. That's now no longer available. And this means massive impact to the European economy. We've seen the gas storage is 40% down from 2 years ago. We've seen the price of gas already doubling in sort of the local wholesale market. And that means that the diversification strategy we put in place after 22 is now itself broken. We've also seen that we have kind of economically, we have kind of multiple factors that are hitting our economy. On one hand, we are ramping up spending on defense. We're expanding the deficits because of that. And so that in itself is inflationary. And then you have this inflation that will hit from energy markets if this doesn't get resolved quickly. So that's a bad cocktail. Could lead to higher interest rates. When there are higher interest rates, people are potentially less likely to allocate to alternatives. That means less money for venture capital, means less money for the startup ecosystem, means less growth. So you kind of have it's kind of a bad cycle of things all around. And some of the same mechanisms that made 23 and 24 brutal for European venture. So hopefully we can find a solution to this. I'd say in parallel, there is upside as well. We've seen just today, the UK government came out with a new report called Building Our Nuclear Nation, and they are really adopting lots of new policies to boost the development of nuclear power, both the small modular reactors and also the bigger power plants. And the whole idea here is really to rebalance our energy mix away from the over-reliance on gas, make it cheaper again. And today, it's almost 5 times as expensive to construct nuclear power generation in the UK as it is in other countries like South Korea. And that, of course, is something we need to address. And that's the whole idea of this new policy. So I'd say that's a good thing. And that is part of a wider backdrop you could look at here, which is that sovereignty is becoming investable. That is sovereign energy, it's sovereign technology, it's sovereign defense. The energy transition, which we've been talking about in Europe more than anywhere else, kind of all this green energy, but it's no longer just about climate policy. It's about energy security. And hopefully that's something that can mean that we can drive more of the right type of investment. And
Mm.
just to top out the segment, I would say, look, we've seen the EU Industrial Accelerator Act, which has just been adopted, kind of the whole made in EU procurement requirements, which are around making sure that we buy more and we create a better market for buying technologies that are developed here in Europe. So potentially some good things that could come out of this if you squint a little bit. But I must admit, the immediate backdrop is tricky.
Yeah, the EU by EU, they've included the UK in that, haven't they? So it's not
Graciously.
we haven't been excommunicated from the clan, which I think is a lovely thing. Lomax, obviously, we are baked in inertia here. This is going to be a challenge. Which aspect would you pick up on?
A few things to pick up as it relates to tech, tech and particularly tech in Europe. So the first thing is, interestingly, the public markets investors seem to have seen that tech as a safe haven. So Mag 7 has performed, it was up 1.7% since the conflict began, vis-a-vis other stocks, which are generally down. So it's kind of ironic that we've been talking potentially about big tech getting over its skis, and now people are flying to said people potentially over their skis as a safe haven from global meltdown. So that's an interesting development. We'll see if that continues. The second one is a point that I personally, and I think we've all been saying a lot repeatedly on this podcast, which is around defense tech, which is that Ukraine has become effectively the Silicon Valley for new age defense tech. So this concept of not developing $5 million missiles and firing them in what you could call old school defense, although we'll talk about that in a minute, because certainly the US has been using plenty of Tomahawk missiles in Iran. This concept of sort of fast fashion aspect of defense, spinning up 10, 20, 30K drones or interceptor drones, using them in either an offensive or defensive way. And Ukraine has obviously built a huge specialism here, sadly, but at least there is, I guess, some upside there. And interestingly, the Americans did not consult the Ukrainians before this conflict, although I think they're now sort of realizing that with the Iranians firing these $20,000, $30,000 Shahed drones and taking out $300 million radar bases that the US has in the region, and obviously airports and critical infrastructure, that the Ukrainians have developed some pretty compelling interceptor drones for the Russian equivalents of those Shahed drones. So actually, clearly, it's worth chatting to the Ukrainians, who are the world's biggest expert on this. So I think that's a very interesting development. It also segues a bit just generally into the economics of warfare. The Americans have been firing these expensive 3.6 million a pop Tomahawk missiles into Iran. I think, interestingly, there's a good article in the FT this week where they said that the Americans have only ordered 322 of these Tomahawk missiles in the last 5 years, where they fired 125 at the Houthis last year, and they've probably fired at least 200 this year. So in a way, they are massively depleting their stocks of these big missiles. But maybe going forwards, we're going to switch to this more sort of faster, agile, smaller, drone-based warfare. And interesting George Bush quote came out in the Benedict Evans newsletter, where he says, "I'm not going to fire a $2 million missile at a $10 empty tent and hit a camel in the butt." A little bit derogatory, but the point is the economics of warfare do matter, and the type and scale of warfare does matter. And clearly, these Shahed drones are causing massive damage locally in the Gulf. Very interestingly, I guess also, but very sadly, in the context of Tomahawk weapons. And I think this maybe feeds into the role of AI in warfare, which feeds into the potential Anthropic debate with the Pentagon, which is we sadly had 2 Tomahawk missiles hit a school on the first day of the conflict in Iran, with I think over 100 children died in that horrendous attack. And interestingly, I read one observer saying on the first day of these attacks is probably when you have the most intelligence at the state at that time. And to make a mistake like that, which clearly was a very targeted attack, supposed to be probably on an Iranian Revolutionary Guards site, is pretty shocking. And there are kind of, first of all, it's pretty obvious that it was an American missile. There's even like a Raytheon, apparently a kind of circuit board that's been discovered at the school, which is the maker of these Tomahawk missiles. This is still too early, and I don't want to set off, rumors or whatever, but talk of was AI used in the targeting? And so suddenly, actually, the role of AI in warfare starts to get incredibly controversial.
You've just thrown a massive brick on the table, haven't you?
Right, I know.
But Lomax, just for the sake of the conversation, isn't the counterpoint pretty obvious here. I mean, we've seen from autonomous vehicles that robot drivers are far more accurate than human drivers, reducing the accident rate by 95%. I mean, I think it's entirely likely that AI-guided targeting would do the same. There's so many situations where humans just can't process all the information that goes into things. And so, I mean, isn't it likely that, if anything, the targeting will be more accurate with AI than
No,
less?
you're totally right. And this is the same with AI for radiology. What it is like, there's this, but as ever, when you adopt new technologies and you start to have this kind of centaur approach of humans working alongside the AI, like a kind of cobot style in the context of a factory, then in a way you might end up with accountability and responsibility and things falling between the cracks, right? It's like, well, human thinks the AI checked it, the AI think the AI kind of did its job, and so you end up. I don't know, who knows, but that is definitely something that we've seen in other industries. Right?
Well, if the perception is there will be a perception issue, if assuming people in the public sphere get to know about these things, there will always be the
Definitely,
PR
I mean, look,
about it
there's also
saying it's the AI.
there's certainly
Killer AI.
there's certainly a big PR element here. I mean, look, obviously Hegseth has taken a much more aggressive stance than his predecessors. He's renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War. I was reading an article this week saying that there was a kind of safety team in the Pentagon which is supposed to avoid collateral damage. 95% of it's been disbanded. So I do think that there is that whole piece going on. This is conjecture mainly, so we should be careful. Certainly, as AI, because there's both like AI almost in a white collar sense with the way that you use it for targeting, and then there's like the kind of autonomous systems and drones that you actually have or will have more and more of in warfare, which are kind of different things and different things to think about. I guess they're all part of the same point. But interesting, taking it back to Europe now in defense, maybe just to finish this is, so yes, the Ukrainians are kind of best in class at this new genre of warfare, and that will only continue. So I think it's good that capability is in Europe. But interestingly, kind of reverse in Europe this week has been the Polish, who obviously on the Eastern Front with Russia have just turned down. The president of Poland has just turned down one of these big safe loans that the EU had promised. So the safe, as a reminder, is this security action for Europe, which is $150 billion of loans that the EU is going to make at cheap, well, roughly 3% interest to certain countries to bolster their defense capabilities, right? And Germany have turned this down because they want it. Germany can obviously borrow more cheaply on the public market. So this is earmarked for countries like Poland. In fact, the loan that was going to Poland was 44 billion, which is a third of that whole budget, basically.
Why was it turned down?
So in Poland you have the sort of more kind of hawkish Donald Trump style president, and you have the more pro-EU Donald Tusk, who's the prime minister. So there's an inherent conflict there, which is an internal Polish issue. But the president turned it down because he doesn't want to effectively be seen to be going, cap in hand to the EU, having to owe the EU all this money, even though Poland borrows at like 5% and they would be getting this loan at 3%. And interestingly, the Polish had only this week approved this new Iron Dome, which has been handed to a Polish and Norwegian contractor for $3.5 billion, which is going to come out of this loan. So that's now going to be kind of kicked into the long grass. The Europeans are still effing about on this kind of stuff when they really need to get a move on. Also, interesting. Polish Iron Dome is $3.5 billion. The US Golden Dome program is $1 trillion project. I don't talk about like there's a delta and there's like an absolute fucking ocean between. I'm not quite sure what you're getting for your money there.
It's Lomax. It's gold, right? It's Trump.
It's gold.
There are so many jokes. I don't even know where to start, so I won't. But I want to stay with Europe, and I want to talk about Europe absolutely nailing it this week. I think I was quite buoyed and pleased this week with the amount of good news that came out in the press. So we got Jan LeCun with Amy in France raising the largest seed round ever at $1 billion. There's a proposal from the E6 countries, that's the EU, Germany, including Germany and France, to reinvigorate the plans to unify the bloc's capital markets, and then asking the EU to govern, not the nations. So that might be a good thing. We've got Alan, Steve. Sorry, that's probably an in-joke for me only. But Alan, the health insurance startup founded in 2016 in Paris, hit nearly 800 million ARR, raising 100 million at $5 billion. Congrats to you. Revolut getting their UK license after a 4-year wait. So loads of good things to be thankful for here. Lomax, anything that you would look at or what we should discuss?
I guess this is Europe's first Instacorn, no? We have that team. We have the team out of DeepMind in the UK, but they haven't actually raised their $1 billion seed round, right? So this is actually actually confirmed Europe's first Instacorn. Instacorn being an opening round of seed round of $1 billion. I think, in the US we had Thinking Machines, that raised $2 billion, and this is the first in Europe. So good on Jan LeCun. It's great that it. I guess the UK would say it's not great that it came out of France, but it's good generally that it came out. The French generally have an amazing heritage in computer science and math, and I guess this is testament to that. Have you seen, the Fields Medal, right? This math prize that gets awarded every 4 years. The French are number 2. They have 13 winners of the Fields Medal behind the US, who won 15.
I did not know that. That is a very interesting bit of information. Thank you.
I know. The French are great mathematicians, which obviously lends well to computer science. So Jan LeCun thinks that current LLMs are fundamentally the wrong path to human level intelligence. I'm sure Mads has a very intelligent thing to say here, but instead AMI is building systems that, learn how the physical world works from video spatial data interaction. They plan, reason, and maintain persistent memory, so closer to cognition than autocomplete, and they act autonomously in real environments, so not just generate text and images. Yeah, I don't know, Mads, these are so-called world models. What's your latest thinking as our current resident AI bot on these theoretical world models?
Very proud to be named an AI bot. Is that sort of next-gen robot?
Bod, not bod.
Sure, I'll take it. I think it's fabulous. I think it's great. World models is obviously where it's at. We've often talked here on the show about how we've been constructing intelligence out of words, and words are incredible. Human language is incredible, and we can see what the models can do, and I marvel at what my Claude Code and my Opus 4.6 does every day, but it only goes so far. And we also know the models can, discuss Newton's physics, and explain them at great length and with great poetry, but they couldn't navigate across a room, right? They can't control things in the real world. They just don't understand how kind of space really works once you get into it. And so you need different kinds of models. And so the whole idea with what Jan LeCun is doing with Jasper, his model at Ami Labs, and others are working on, is to create models that have this spatial intelligence and innately understand, how the world is actually built up of atoms, not just the words that describe them.
Mads, you may have an answer to this. What else is beyond world models? So we've got large language, we've got some obviously small language, other variants, world models. What else would fit into the completion pot? Do you know?
I don't know that we know yet, Dan. I think there was a time when people didn't think that LLMs would be more than autocomplete. And I think what they can do today goes far beyond what most people, even many of the inventors, thought we'd be able to do with the models. I mean, they are incredible. But it's also clear that they have limitations. And so the idea of a world model, the idea of models with spatial intelligence, is the thing that has emerged as the next big frontier. And it's a frontier. I mean, the map's not been charted yet. We don't know what lies beyond. We don't know whether we're going to go into this world of world models, and that is where the rainbow ends and the pot of gold is, or whether there is another thing beyond it. Of course, we will keep finding new technology. We will keep doing new things. But I think we talked at the start of the year about when are we going to get to AGI? And my assertion at the time is there's no way you can get to AGI with an LLM. Because until you really understand space, you can't have general intelligence.
Yeah.
But it is plausible that with a world model like what LeCun is developing, you can get to AGI. You can get to something that understands the world well enough to be able to do anything a human can do without limitation.
It's a bad analogy, but it always feels like these frontiers are part of a brain. And we're building the building blocks of it is a bad analogy, so I'll just stop there. But it feels like we got whatever, your amygdala, and you got your world models, which is your prefrontal cortex, and maybe some other things.
It's not as bad an analogy as you might think. It turns out that if you look biologically at how the brain works and how synapses fire and how different neurons, they work together to think about concepts. Well, actually, LLMs work in similar ways, and we can see how they fire, and we can see how different regions of an LLM will fire and work together to address specific and complex concepts. Now, the truth is, the biology of human intelligence is still not very well understood, which is why, as I see it, biology is the next big frontier for us. Computer science seems to be largely a solved problem. And it is likely that we can get, certainly software development is a solved problem, and it's likely that we can get within the next few years to something that looks and feels like AGI, a model that is so powerful it can do anything a human can do. And what is the next frontier then? If we've conquered silicon, if we've conquered the digital world and everything that happens there, well, recursive self-improvement is then limitless, right? If the model is so smart, it can just get better and better in that world. And the thing that's left for us is biology. It's the real world. It's understanding how plants and humans and animals and how all that stuff works. So this is incredibly exciting. And so to your point is, I think it's hard for us to say exactly what the analogies are with human brains and human intelligence and digital intelligence, because human intelligence in itself isn't that well understood yet.
Yeah.
Blimey. We're
So
going to
I
get
think
into singularity chat soon, aren't we?
bringing us back,
Sorry, Lomax.
bringing us back to real to the here and now. I think this is a huge thing. This is a huge milestone for Europe. Potentially a great, research hub that even if this thing, to be honest, even this thing doesn't really work out, which I hope it will, you have an amazing pool of capital, hiring an amazing and fostering an amazing group of talent in Paris, right? And we all know what comes from that. You look at the people spinning out of DeepMind now to create their own company. So I think this can only be a good thing. Elsewhere in Europe, as you said, Revolut secured their UK banking license in
4 years.
in 4 years.
It only took 4 years.
It took 4 years. I mean, yeah, it's just like classic UK FCA malaise, but great for Revolut, which is still on a massive tear. I think still on progress for 100 million customers by.
Aren't they getting their US license at the same time? Didn't I see that this week?
I just don't know what the latest valuation is 70 billion. I think they're now doing a secondary at 100 billion. I just don't know what the cap is on Revolut,
Well, we didn't really pick up on LondonMaxing, which is the thing that's been trending here over the last week. I just thought it was beautiful to see. There's so much happening right now in London's AI scene in terms of investment, in terms of companies. Now, clearly, Amilabs and LeCun is in Paris. I think that's wonderful. But if you look at the capital, if you look at the talent that's flowing into London right now, if you look at the scale up, OpenAI, Meta is investing here in their AI lab, so much is happening. So I just think that's great to see.
Yeah, and there's a number of American R&D outfits that are starting to move back to Europe or move to Europe, which I think is kind of interesting. And I'd like to see how that plays out over time.
This is all good stuff because it all ties into these people can spin out and create their own companies going forwards right over the next 5-10 years. So I think that's very, very exciting. A couple of other things I found interesting is which I think is hugely exciting is the co-founders of BioNTech, which, to be honest, is the biggest tech company, at $25 billion market cap, is probably the biggest tech company that's emerged from Europe in the last 15 years, or one of them. Clearly, Revolut is 70 billion, but BioNTech is certainly up there. The founders, Ugur Sahin and Özlem Türeci, sorry, those Turkish names.
Well done.
I probably
well done.
There.
I would have bastardized those.
Butchered, should I say? But they are now announced. BioNTech is obviously a listed company. Famous for its COVID vaccine, among other things, or its pioneering of this mRNA vaccine technology, which they're now using in the NHS to run trials for cancer vaccines. It's a hugely important company. They have now announced they're going to spin out and create their own startup, which, I don't know if it'll be an Instacorn because biotech is not quite.
Why?
That as much is not clear, but they're running a 25 billion market cap listed company.
Is it the innovation angle? Is it because they can't move as fast or do as much?
I'm not going to speak for them, but yeah, of course, if they raise a lot of money in a private company to target something new, then they'll be able to move potentially faster, right? So I think that's exciting for sure, and good to see that.
Apple was good at that.
These guys,
I had a couple of friends who worked at Apple.
Yeah,
they were good at that. They were good at creating the internal competition, conflict, independence, so that they could get some good stuff going. I had a couple of friends in some of the departments there.
At the more macro level, one thing that you flagged in the docket was around this, the Europe's 6 largest economies, the E6. Pop quiz. What are the 6 largest economies in the EU? Come on.
I would go Germany, France, Italy. Oh, blimey.
Well, that was an easy one.
Poland? Yeah. Poland?
Yes.
Spain, Netherlands.
Yeah, okay. Obviously, Mads knows. So the E6 want to create a central supervisor for stock markets and other critical financial entities. This is something that's been floated and talked about for a long time as a sort of harmonization of capital markets to make things easier to both raise money and deploy capital. And this was included in the 2024 Mario Draghi report on competitiveness. It's kind of been, since then, a little bit kicked into the long grass. It's now being picked up again by the E6. At the core of it is a proposal to move supervision of large cross-border stock exchanges to ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Agency based in Paris. So I think this is if this happens, it's a really, really good thing. It sounds really boring, and it is the kind of EU taking a little bit more control away from countries, right? But I think at the benefit though of like harmonization, simplification, potentially certainty, reducing costs for raising capital, doing business in the public finance markets. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing. As ever, it's the Luxembourg people don't like it. The Irish, who are actually about to take over the presidency of the EU Council, don't like it. Apparently, you need to get 65%, whatever relevant threshold of the countries to agree. So if they can get it through,
So
I think it's necessary. No, I think this kind of I think
it is.
Need to. Yeah.
I got the impression that the countries are up for it, as in they wanted to relinquish and say, "Come on, you govern, we'll be part of this," but maybe it won't get through. We'll see.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing, and it's Merz once again who has forced Germany to do 180 because they were blocking it for many reasons, but he sort of said, "Look, we've got to make this happen." It's super interesting.
It makes sense. I can see why individual nations would block it. I get it. But it's interesting that they have done a 180. That's great. Guys, let's talk about Cursor, because I can't not talk about Cursor. They're looking at a 50 bill valuation, which is nuts, up from 30 bill 4 months ago. Their story will go down in history, no doubt. I wonder if it'll be in flames. Just a little bit of context to put their trajectory in perspective. They were valued at 2.6 in January 24. So that's 20x in a year. They're doing about a 2 billion run rate. They're serving many of the Fortune 500s. They've grown from 12 people to 300 in 3 years. However, it's an aggregator. It sits on top of the foundational models, and they're the middleman. So why would you go to the middleman when you can go direct to the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, and the Googles? That said, 2 very quick wildcards for you. Could Microsoft swoop in and get them to replace a lot of the not so loved products, should I say, in the Microsoft armory? And the other is looking a little bit behind the scenes, and I'm not a massive Cursor guru here, maybe one of you two are, but are they actually in a better position than we think by having the customers? I think they've got about 1.5 million customers now, about a third of that paying. So are they taking all this information and feeding their own model, Composer, and distilling? I'm not trying to cast shade here, but are they actually in a much better shape because they've got the data, they've got the users, and they're just training their own models? So they're in a much stronger position. Mads, this is more your loving space than mine. Where would you go?
I think it's instructive to look at the history of how we got here. AI coding became a thing. Anysphere, the company behind Cursor, were very quick to take VS Code, which is an integrated developer environment. So that means kind of a place where coders can make code. Historically, when you made a software program, you'd have an IDE where you could sit and you could look at the code, you could run some tests, you could see how it did, you had a little terminal window, you could see all your files, you could click them easily. Kind of a place where you have a command console, like a mission control, where you could do everything and write your code. So VS Code was very popular, and they forked it, and they hooked that up to the LLMs, and presto, they created a beautiful user experience that said, look, you're already writing your code. Why don't we just feed all this LLM goodness in here to help you make it better, help propose code, help make changes. You can chat with your code base. It can propose how to improve it. That was wonderful. And for a while, the whole world thought that is how we're going to be coding. Until a year ago, when Anthropic launched Claude Code and said, guys, maybe we just don't need to look at the code anymore. Maybe we just don't need an IDE. And people said it was heresy. People said, no way. And Dario Amodei from Anthropic, he said, look, I really think that in 6 to 9 months, most of the code is going to be written by AI, and it's not going to be code anymore. And people said, heresy, this is not going to happen. Well, it happened, right? And by Q4 last year, most of the diehards, they folded. And today, I don't know anybody who is sort of a leading thinker on coding who writes their own code. It's just, why would you do that? And if you don't write your own code, you don't need Cursor. There's no point in having an IDE unless you sit and look at the code. But if you use Claude Code or Codex, which is OpenAI's copy or kind of their knockoff, or if you use anti-gravity, which is Google's version, you don't need an IDE. And so I just can't see how this can end in anything other than flames. Now, Jasper is the parallel, if you remember that. Before ChatGPT was released, Jasper was this app that wrapped GPT and could help you write copy and other creative tasks. And then ChatGPT was released, right? And Jasper made it to 1.5 billion valuation, and it just totally collapsed. And I don't know if Curse is going to disappear completely, but the growth rate is certainly going to slow down, and I think they're going to go in reverse.
I'm totally with you.
So that's my assessment.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Lomax, do you disagree?
Don't disagree, no.
No, I think it is going to be slightly flaming, but we'll see. Maybe there's a bit of M&A. I'm assuming there is a listing not too distant in their future, potentially. I've not seen anything for 26, but okay. Well, let's stay with AI. We got the AI and chips war, I've called this, on the docket. We've got a bunch of news in your happy space, Mads. Big tech backing Anthropic. Now, it looks like this is big tech saying to the Trump administration, please don't list them as a security threat. It looks like everybody apart from Meta got in on that. And I don't know why Meta didn't, but maybe there's a reason there. And then Sadiq Khan, bless him, chipped in and said, why don't you come to London? Come and hang out in London. We'll love you. Meta's building its own chips, building and using its own chips, which is really interesting, bypassing Nvidia completely. A little circularity revisit with Nvidia and thinking machines, some deals and some love being done there. It's GDC, so Nvidia's conference this week or this coming week, drawing 25,000 engineers from across the world. Wonder what's in store there. So Mads, I don't know, lots of AI interesting stuff. Take your pick.
Yeah, amazing development. And I'd say one of the things we've been talking about is NVIDIA's unassailable moat and how long could they keep up the high net profit margin rates they've had, right? Sort of in the mid to high 70s, unheard of in any other industry at any other time. What we're seeing is exactly what we've been talking about, which is the market bifurcating. You've got GPUs used for training and you've got chips used for inference. And now Meta is releasing their own inference chips, and they are really, really good from what we can see. So good that they might be even faster at inference or better at inference on a price performance basis than Nvidia's chips.
Because they tried before, didn't they, Matt? They tried last year. What was it? Was it Dragon something? They tried a different chipset and it didn't work.
Look, Google is now on the 7th generation of their TPUs. Some of this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Okay. But it's really interesting that at first, for the first time, it looks like there is kind of a real, major challenge here to sort of the NVIDIA fortress. Now, obviously, Google has already had theirs, right? But NVIDIA is a massive customer. Meta's a massive customer of NVIDIA. Now, are they also going to start to produce their own, kind of roll their own silicon? Not for training, because that's still going to be NVIDIA's turf, but for inference. So that's super interesting. The custom ASICs market, so the market for custom chips that are used for inference, is growing 3 times faster than GPUs. Now, at the same time, the bull case for NVIDIA is still strong. Certainly, they have CUDA, they've got a great advantage when it comes to training. And we also know that the market, the overall AI market, is expanding so quickly that although they're using share in inference, revenue is still growing at a formidable rate. But, Intel also had a moat, right, with ASICs, and they had the best fabs once upon a time. It did take a decade for decline to show, but eventually we know where they ended up. So very, very interesting development. Now, next week, we have a big week because it is GTC. It is, where all the great and goods of the world of AI travel to see the Jensen Huang show and NVIDIA's global tech conference.
I wonder if he'll be wearing a black leather jacket. I just don't know. Maybe he will.
He has promised a chip that will surprise the world.
Has he?
And so that'll be very interesting to see what actually happens.
We saw a bit more of the whole AI jobs theme play out. Atlassian cutting a number of jobs, and interestingly, Oracle lining up to do the same, amassing a huge $500 million restructuring budget. So I think Oracle is planning massive headcount reductions, as is Atlassian, and is consistent with what we talked about with with Block is, maybe it's just they're using it as an excuse
They
for
have
a
to
sort of
be.
more general riff.
Well, no one uses Jira anymore, right? So I'm assuming they've got a little bit of trouble at Mill.
Exactly. And then we saw, Atlassian's one of the worst performing stocks on the market, this year. And I think you pointed out Sadiq Khan, making overtures to Anthropic. I think, if you're a business leader, I think that's probably it.
What else? What else have we missed? Has anyone got any deals of the week?
Another Instacorn, actually. I guess this
But not a European, right?
So, well, no, I guess Instacorn in the sense that it's a company that out the gate is $1 billion valuation, which is this Ukrainian defense team called UForce. Ukrainian founders, but they're based in the UK, I think, or they're split across both countries. Have just raised 50 million. I think led by Lakestar. Lakestar seem to be doing anything that's sort of almost half good in defense. Lakestar, especially in Germany, seem to be in every single defense company.
In that case, gentlemen, unless there's anything more for any more, we are cooked for this week.
Quite a short episode.
Well, week ahead.
What's happening? What are you doing?
Well,
Where are you going? What are you doing? Are you on a plane? No.
I am blissfully not. At GTC, we've already talked about the Fed's got a meeting. It's the first Fed rate decision since the oil shock. The consensus is it'll be a hold, but it looks like the cuts in interest rates are being pushed from June to September. And so there's obviously this double supply shock that we've talked about, both the tariffs and now the oil on top. And we've also got the ECB, March 18, 19 also coming up. And again, there is a probability, 42% probability, according to Polymarket, of a rate hike in 2026. Really? Yeah. So that's obviously going in the wrong direction.
End on an upside, crazy kids. Where can we end? The other thing that I saw this week, which will interest neither of you, was the audio devices, the pendants and the rings and the listening devices for note taking. I cannot see in a world of Sundays why you would ever need any of these devices, but I kind of think they're always cool when people are poking the bear launching new tech. So I'm going to keep an eye and see. So I was flat wrong about the Meta glasses, although I've never seen anybody wearing any. I know there's lots sold, but I've never seen anyone wearing them. So we'll see on these pendants.
You can't buy them in Europe, no? You can't buy the glasses.
You could buy them in some European countries, I think.
Meta are doubling down on these things, so don't expect them to go away anytime soon.
No, listen, I don't think they will work. I think they will become shelfware. I think they'll become a social pariah, is my take. I don't buy it. I don't believe in it, but we'll see. But on the audio pendants and the rings and the note-taking devices, when you've got a phone, I don't know why you'd ever need another microphone in the room with you, but we'll see what happens there. So, gentlemen, that is it. If we have no more good stuff to share with the world, we'll call it a day, and I'll catch you all next week.
See you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.